Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good day everyone. How's the session so far? Hopefully we can gain something from all the presentations today. Before we start, let me introduce myself. My name is Nurhani binti Muhammad Jais. I am a master student from School of Communication, University Science Malaysia. So my topic today is about the role of historical events and collective memory in defining general cohort of Malaysia. Okay, the act of dividing or segmenting the market into a generation is a popular practice in marketing field. This happens because we can better understand the consumer in terms of their purchase pattern, media consumption and others. This information is crucial because it will help the practitioners, business owners to develop suitable campaign and strategic marketing plan to target this generation. So, initial cohort is a cluster of people who born during a certain period of time. They share similar values, attitude, lifestyle, and these characteristics remain unchanged throughout their life. They are bonded by a certain historical event like political changes, economic changes, technological innovation, and others. These events happen during their coming of age years. The idea came from a sociologist named Carl Mayhem in 1920s. He mentioned that a generation that experienced similar historical event during their coming of age years usually will exhibit similar values and worldview, and eventually it influenced their life. So these coming of age or formative years happen at the age of 17 up to 25 years old. But there are some scholars who argue that it can start as early as 13 up to 30 years old. So this formative phase is important because during that time we develop our cognitive abilities and we experience physical, emotional and social development growth. Talking about these formative years, have you seen any of this? Okay, I remember particularly this drama, Winter Sonata. I remember I watched it during at the age of 17 years old, at the early of 2000. Okay, because of that experience, I become more interested into the Korean culture and I become more appreciative towards their history and culture. Okay, it shows how that even that this small event, small experience happened to me during my formative years, it influenced me until now. Okay, so why is defining the cohort of Malaysia is important? Because we usually use the general cohort based on Western perspective. These Western perspective associated with their own historical event, particularly in United States. So by just adapting this generational label and define our own generational label could hamper the understanding of consumer behavior. So these are some generational label that we know. It is widely known by people. Okay, so this particular generation label that we know, it is associated with unique historical event happen in that country. For instance, like silent generation, it is associated with the World War II, and the baby boomers associated with the Vietnam Wars, and while the younger generation relate to more on 9/11 incident. It is also suggested that because of this event, it is eventually influence the values, attitude and belief of this generation. So we can see that this generation will exhibit different values, attitude and belief. So when talking about historical event, collective memory also came hand in hand. because the act of remembering and recalling past historical event is called collective memory. It is a memories of past events that were widely shared by members of society. For example, this research by Schumann and Scott, they asked about 1,000 Americans to recall national and world events that happened 50 years ago until now. So the result shows that World War II and Vietnam conflict were the most common event that mentioned by all age group. So this become the basis for my study where I want to see what kind of historical event being remembered by Malaysian societies. So the effort of defining generational cohort is also done by other countries because they know that each country have their own unique historical event. So we cannot just adapt the Western or the US generation label to define our own generation label. So these countries like Brazil, Sweden, Russia and China, they develop their own generation label. So the effort of defining of Malaysia is also done by Hiram Ting and his team. It is still in the early stage because it is in qualitative manner and it is done in Sarawak only. But they managed to identify several historical events that uniquely happened in Malaysia. So to systematically understand all the historical events, we can do it in the quantitative manner. So hopefully this statistical test and systematic sampling will get rigorous result. So the result will help the industry to better understand the consumer. Okay, from my preliminary study, okay, I asked around 60 respondents from 6 age group. So these events like GST introduction, last generation and social media advancement were the most frequent mentioned by the younger generation. We can see from the graph that it is slightly high among the younger generation and it is decreased among the older generation. As for this Reformation era economic crisis in 1998 and introduction of TV, from the graph we can see that it is mostly mentioned by the older generation. We can see the spike start from the age 45 and above. Okay, we also may ask the respondent to mention the most historical event that they remember the most. Okay, so they mentioned these 5 historical events. Last generation, 30th May, terrorism, tsunami, and Highland Towers. These are some of the events that frequently mentioned by the respondent. When we ask them further why they mention this event, for the Highland Towers, the respondent said because it was mentioned a lot in the media and it is become the talk of a town and many people dies and injured. As for the 13 May incident, this Usually this older generation, they experience it, like for this one, it happened in their communities, even though they are not involved in the chaos, but it has really affected them. As for the general election, why they mention is it is impactful to them because it was meaningful to the public because people want a clean government, and because during that time it is unexpected result where 60 years of BN become a government, and it was collapsed because of general election 14. Okay, from the result we can see that each age group recall different type of event. For instance, younger generation, they recall the current event like introduction of GST, general election, and social media advancement. As for the older generation, they mention about the economic crisis, information era, introduction of television. So we can see that people who experience the event directly, they tend to remember it the most. So it shows how the generation and historical event are really much related to each other. This historical event can become the characteristic to define a generation. Okay, I hope you enjoy my presentation and you can get something out of it. If you have any suggestion, you can reach me at nurhani@gmail.com.my. Thank you for your time.